welcome to Feminist Buzzkills Live. We have a very special live podcast today from the headquarters of the incredible political and cultural magazine Brownstone Cowboys. To my right is the woman who's been doing this podcast with me for 100 episodes. Marketing manager, runs all things AAF, Moji Alawode. And to my left is a man who I can't think of anybody I would rather talk to about what's happening at the Supreme Court. The one and only, I'm going to say Supreme Court Slayer? Yes. Supreme Court Slayer.
Now you're trying to get me in trouble.
From The Nation magazine, Elie Mystal is here in the house. Before we dive in, I think, Elie, you're just one of those people that when we read you, when we see you, you're like just this knowledge font. But I feel like I want to know a little bit about you. So, Moji, I think we were talking about what did we want to ask Elie? And you said,
you are obviously fascinating and exciting and have interesting things happening. But we like to get to what is really boring and basic about you. I have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I go on and on about Thor Ragnarok with Liz, and she is doing what she does when I do that, which is just her eyes glaze over. And Liz also.
Yeah, I'll go on and on about Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota. I will go on and on ad nauseum to the point where people are like, shut the fuck up.
Particularly about the state fair. Seriously, if she's not talking about the state fair with you yet, you haven't gotten into a conversation with Liz yet. So Elie, what's your rambly weird thing like that?
The most basic bitch thing about me is that I'm a gamer. And so I've got, my college friends, I literally met them on the first or second day of college. I met my wife on the third day of college, and we're all a group still. And so one of the ways that we still interact as a friend group is that we play games together. So I'll spend, most of my evenings, and especially my weekend evenings tonight, tonight's Sunday, but most of my evenings are spent online getting shot to death by 16 or 17-year-olds while I complain about how old we've gotten. And they shout Trump messages at me while they're killing me, and it makes me incredibly angry. But man, when I get them, I'm like, Joe Biden says hello. That's my hobby.
Nice. So we can get to the meat of why we're here, which is, of course, to talk about EMTALA. But before that, we wanted to just briefly weigh on this trend. I don't know if you guys know about Jonathan Mitchell. He is the attorney who used to be the Solicitor General for the state of Texas, who wrote the SB 8 law, which was the Texas bounty hunter law. And recently, for the last year or so, he's really been weighing in with ex-boyfriends of people who may have had abortions, not even may have. So last year, it was a woman who was leaving a toxic relationship. Her friends are good friends, so they helped her get abortion pills in Texas. And he launched a case, said their names in Texas, and it's still being litigated. But just this week, we found out about a new case he was working on.
Yeah, he's teamed up with the ex-husband of somebody who traveled to have an abortion in Colorado. And for those of you, this bounty hunter law, and I think it's important to say, doesn't prosecute the patient. It prosecutes everybody who helped. So Jonathan Mitchell's whole game on this is, I'm going to try all my legal means to get the names of the funds that helped, the friends, the person that drove them everywhere to make a case. He will take on anything. He's an absolute unconstitutional troll. And we're seeing this more and more and more. And we were waiting kind of to see how these bounty hunter laws were going to play out. And Elie, I just wanted you to weigh in because it feels like not legal.
Right.
I didn't go to lawyer school. I think that's what they call it. But it seems like not legal that if somebody wants to get an abortion in a state where it's legal and they travel there, that you can't hunt them down like Hunger Games.
Or hunt down their friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first lesson of today is that anything is legal if 5 Supreme Court justices say it.
Oh, great.
And so one of the things that I always try to disabuse people of is you cannot think of the law as an objective thing that exists regardless of what political persuasion you are. That's just not how the law works at all. The law in our country is what 5 people in robes say it is. And what the Republicans on the Supreme Court is, and I call them Republicans, not conservatives, because that's what they are. They're Republican politicians who happen to wield judicial power. The law is what 5 of them say it is on any particular issue, including this issue of bounty hunting, including this issue of finding out where women have gone to. So on the specifics of Jonathan Mitchell, and just to understand who Jonathan Mitchell is, if you've ever heard of John C. Calhoun, he was the secessionist who kind of came up with a theory of secession. He was dead by the time the Civil War started, but like the Civil War was his kind of idea. Like Jonathan Mitchell is like his cousin. Like basically how to think of them, right? As the Solicitor General of Texas, you know who had the job before him?
Ted Cruz.
So like this is the kind of person we are talking about, an old school Confederate, not just Confederate in the terms of like his racial and gendered issues, but literally in his idea of where the power is in this country. He thinks that it's entirely with the states and not at all with the federal government, all right? So that's who he is like as a person, as a legal figure. What he's trying to do with these lawsuits to find women who have had abortions through their intimate partners, what he's getting at is something that, so you know how conservatives overturned abortion by saying that it wasn't in the Constitution because the dead white men who wrote the Constitution didn't happen to say that women had rights because women couldn't also vote or finish their sentences according to them. So like they didn't bother to mention that. You know what also is in the Constitution? A right to family, a right to travel. All of these things that we think of as kind of fundamental familial rights, those are also not actually written in the Constitution. Those come to us through the operation either of state law or our understanding of the 14th and 15th Amendment and the right to due process. So if you don't think the 14th and 15th Amendment should exist, if you don't think the due process of laws, the substantive due process of laws is important, then not only can you attack the right to an abortion, but you can also attack the right to travel and the right to start a family. And so what he's doing with these lawsuits is that he's exposing another flaw essentially in the Constitution, that the right to travel is not explicitly put in as a constitutional amendment or right. And he's saying you don't actually have a right to travel. And so I can, with the power of the state, sue to figure out where you have traveled and what you may have done while you've traveled there. That's number one. The second aspect of these cases is that, again, you have to kind of start from his horrible first principles. And if your horrible first principle is that women who get abortions are criminals, right? Well, if I shoot somebody in New York State and then run to Colorado, New York State can find my ass, right? We have extradition from Colorado. You can empower Colorado police officers to find me because I committed a murder in New York, right? You don't have to call the FBI for that. You can get Colorado local and state police to find my murderous ass and bring me back to New York where I killed somebody. If you go to Colorado to kill a baby, which is how they are thinking of it, is how they are saying it, then it makes sense that you can empower the Colorado police to send the baby killer back to Texas. And so everything starts from the premise that women are not people, fetuses are people, and you kind of go from there.
But we're hearing about states, California, Minnesota, other states that are saying we will not allow people to be medical records or to be extradited for abortion. Can states do that?
Yes.
And that's where states need to be going right now?
Yes. What happens is when the request from Texas comes into Colorado, it says like, hey, you got some abortion people in there. You should do. What needs to happen is Colorado say, fuck off. Like that's literally what Colorado has to respond with in this battle. They have to say, no, Texas, we don't agree with your law. We're not going to do your dirty work for you. We're not going to tell you. So far, 19 state attorney generals have filed requests in other states to find out who may have traveled to those states to receive abortions. It's not just Jonathan Mitchell. 19 different states attorney generals have done this. And so far, they've all been rejected. But I say so far with an important caveat, because that so far is happening in a world where the federal government is not weighing in.
Right.
What happens, do you think, when the federal government weighs in? And when the federal government under, say, a Republican administration or a Trump administration tells the states that they have to give this information to the other states, then that power that the states have to say fuck off suddenly kind of disappears. I'm glad you're bringing this up because it's one of the ways in which Republicans can outlaw abortion without passing a horribly unpopular, probably will never get past national abortion ban. I don't think they have the political juice to do that, but the important thing for people to understand is that they don't have to. They don't have to do the frontal attack on abortion rights in Congress. There are all these kinds of other ways. And what Jonathan Mitchell is doing is showing the Republicans, because you gotta remember, fundamentally, Republicans are fucking dumb. Like, they don't actually understand how things work, especially the Trump administration. So what Jonathan Mitchell is doing is showing the Trump administration, showing the Stephen Millers and the Mike Davises and the people who are likely to be attorney general next time of the world, how you ban abortion without having to pass a national abortion ban. And this is exactly one of the ways in which they can do it, by forcing the states to reveal who has traveled to their state for medical care will effectually make it so that women cannot travel out of state to get medical care, because if they do, when they come back home, they will be prosecuted.
Also, I think what happens, and it's just on a much smaller scale, but also because the SB 8 was written basically so you can't attack the person who had the abortion, you can attack their friends, is it really makes friends not want to help you, right? Because if you live in Texas and you feel like you help your friend find an abortion, get an abortion to help pay for it, and then Jonathan Mitchell is going to basically open a case to look at all your friends and splash those names on front pages of news if they can, that's what he does.
Think about, so what I call these anti-abortion laws the fugitive uterus laws, right? And I don't do that just to be funny, although I do think it's kind of...
Can we call them futuruses?
We do love a portmanteau.
I love a portmanteau.
We do love a portmanteau.
There's a wit there. But it's because they're doing exactly the same thing they did with the fugitive slave laws. If you think about what a fugitive slave law is trying to do, it's not trying to scare black people. Black people escaping from slavery didn't give a shit about your fugitive slave. Like, they already rejected your laws, right? It was the fugitive slave laws were trying to scare white people. They were trying to scare the helpers of the freed slaves, of the escaping slaves, and to tell the white people, hey, if you help this Negro, we're gonna come for you too. The Underground Railroad did not end in New York City or Chicago. The Underground Railroad ended in Montreal fucking all, right? Because Harriet Tubman and them were just like, no, get entirely out of this asshole country is what you gotta do because of fugitive slave laws. And so the fugitive uterus laws are working in exactly the same way. They're trying to scare the helpers. They're trying to isolate women and pregnant people who need reproductive care and telling them nobody will help you. You might get out of Texas, you might get out of Arkansas, you might get all the way to Oregon, and it's not going to be far enough because our laws will reach out to Oregon and catch you and bring you back under our heel. So that's why they're there. They are both an isolationist and a fear tactic to menace the helpers and to tell pregnant people that there is no help. That's why they're there. And that's why they're so, I think, terrible and dangerous.
Well, that's a good point to transition into what's been happening at the Supreme Court this year. And I also just want to say that it's also why we are all culpable in this. We kind of didn't pay attention. And the fact that abortion is now in criminal courts, that we criminalize pregnancy in this country, is something we should all be profoundly disgusted by. And we should be stopping that by any means necessary, because anybody who might need care can now be criminalized. That's what tyrants do. That is not how we should be behaving. So
Can I interrupt for a second just to back you up here? Because I think a lot of times in these debates, we talk about the Republicans and the evil that they want to do. But let's not forget the complicity of the Democratic Party throughout all of this. Because one of the reasons why we're here is because Democrats did not fight for abortion rights nearly enough over the 50 years that they had them.
And told us to shut up about it. I want to be very, very clear. I started this organization in 2012, kind of looking at what happened because of what was going on in the States. There was no Donald Trump on the horizon. We had a president we all liked. We didn't even vote in midterms until 2006. We did this. And not only did we do it, we were told to shut the fuck up about it because we were divisive and men won't care and let's talk
You're
about
being
things people care
hysterical.
about.
And abortion rights are going nowhere. We were told this repeatedly. Abortion rights are going nowhere in 2018.
Because Democratic men were afraid of talking about it. They were afraid of talking about it politically because they thought that the abortion issue motivated the right while didn't do anything for the left. And I don't think that that's actually been proven to be true. I mean, if you just look at where we are right now, I think it's certainly not true. But Democrats in the kind of 2000s era certainly thought that. But the other thing is that Democrats themselves were male Democrats themselves were uncomfortable with abortion, right? Democratic men have treated abortion as the escape option for the irresponsible cheerleader, right? Oh, well, if she had closed her legs, things would be better, but like that's how, right? Whereas Republicans are like, crusade against the baby killers, right? And we're like, wah, wah.
That's what I was going to get to. Republicans basically set the tone, right? I think even up until very recently, even when you saw media coverage, they were using anti-abortion talking points in progressive media because they let them set the tone. They set words like late-term abortion, which is not a thing. There are all these ways that Republicans set the conversation, and then Democrats were like, I guess they know what they're talking
Which
about.
is completely the wrong frame. That's why I tend to not call myself pro-choice. I am anti-forced birth. Because I start from the premise that a state government cannot force a person to do 9 months of labor against their will for no pay. We already have a word for that. We already have an amendment for that. It's the 13th Amendment that outlaws slavery. We do not force people to do labor because the state thinks that it would be cool if they did it for no money. That's just not how it's supposed to work. The idea that you can force a person to do this work, and I do not know this from personal experience. I watched it from afar. I stayed north of the border during the birth of my 2 kids. All right, I didn't want to know. All right, but from what I saw, seemed pretty painful. From what I saw, it didn't seem like a fun day at the hospital. The idea that you can force a person to do that who does not want to do that is ridiculous to me. And the idea that you can force a person to do that who did not want to get pregnant in the first place, as in the cases of rape or incest, I don't have a word for that. That's barbaric. That's not something that a legitimate state, is allowed to do. So I come at the abortion debate not from the perspective of like, oh, I want people to have choice. Because like, yeah, sure, choice is awesome. Like, great, I love it. Right? I come at it from the perspective of there is a limit to the legitimate use of state power. And forcing pregnant people to give birth against their will is not a legitimate use of that power.
I think that also talking about how extreme labor is in birth is an excellent way to transition into this EMTALA case, because it also goes into when it's not going well, what kind of medical care do we deserve, right? Do we deserve?
So let me ask this question. By applauding, how many of you are familiar with the case that the Supreme Court just heard in the emergency rooms? Just so we can kind of get... Great. How many of you are like, I kind of heard about it, but I really want to know more? Okay, great. So that's great. I just want to know where our foundational point is and jumping off point is. Am I jumping off for you?
You can jump off.
Okay,
Go ahead,
great.
talk about the case.
It's really just next level. So it's called Idaho versus the United States. So already have to battle Idaho. A state known for potatoes and white supremacy. So nailing it. So basically, Idaho, like so many states, when Roe fell, were like, you know what? Let's oppress our people as much as we can. They created a near total abortion ban that basically allowed for saving the life of the person. They have kind of their own bounty hunting law. They call it abortion trafficking. You know, using trafficking to say you can't help a minor access abortion, it's trafficking, all this kind of shit. And so when that happened, you know, the federal government was trying to figure out a way that they could somehow preempt these horrible laws. And there is a law that is on the books that is called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. EMTALA is the acronym. And what that says is, if you are a hospital or any kind of medical clinic that provides emergency services and you accept Medicare, federal Medicare dollars, you cannot turn away somebody who is indigent, somebody who does not have insurance, you have to stabilize them. And it happened, the law was created during Reagan. Believe it or not, Reagan was like, hey, I think we're being too mean to people. Weird. It was called hospital dumping. And what they were doing is people would show up at private hospitals and they needed to be stabilized. And private hospitals were like, oh, you don't have insurance? We're going to send you to a county hospital. We're going to send you somewhere else. I mean, and it was bad. Like there was a woman who was crowning in her pregnancy in Texas. She happened to mention, my husband just lost his job. They literally put an IV in her, shut her legs, called the county hospital, and she was crowning and had the baby in the hallway of that hospital.
This
and that
is
was
Texas in
happening
the 80s.
all the time. Yeah. And so they were like, yeah, we need a law that you can't do that. So when Idaho and all these other states were like, hey, Idaho, we have this federal law and you can't create laws that supersede federal law. So you got to treat people. And if you don't, we're going to sue you. Idaho was like, fuck you. We don't have to. We have our law. We think our law trumps your law. Let's go. And they end up at SCOTUS. It's basically where we're at. So let's kick off question 1, which is basically Idaho argued their case. Our side argued our case. Overall, Ellie, before we get into the details, how did it go?
Poorly. It went extremely poorly. It was one of the more infuriating Supreme Court arguments that I've listened to. Supreme Court, since COVID, puts all of their arguments live. They live stream all of their arguments, so you don't have to go there. You can just hear it from the comfort of your home. And I honestly started my morning with my coffee, and I ended my morning, it was a 2-hour argument, I ended my morning with my rum. Because over the course of those 2 hours, I heard some of the dumbest shit ever, mainly from the male justices on SCOTUS, who evinced an understanding of women's reproductive health that I have been more educated than since I was in like 7th grade. I mean, it was literally a kind of like, if Peppa Pig had to explain what an abortion is, it would be better than what Sam Alito understood about what an abortion is. Like, it was that level of stupidity, to the point where, okay, so legally speaking, the difference between the Idaho law and the federal law turns on the word health. The Idaho law says that you have to give an abortion, even with their ban, that you have to give an abortion if the life of the mother or pregnant person is at risk. And the federal law says you have to give an abortion if the health of the mother or pregnant person exists. And obviously, there is a linguistic difference there. So, but not to the men on the Supreme Court, who said, one of the lawyers arguing the case for Idaho said, and I quote, "There's really no situation in which the health of a mother is at risk, but the life is not."
And then Kagan came in with receipts.
Not receipts in terms of like dropping her pants and being like, look, like, although she would have been within her
but
rights
she
to
had
do so.
all examples. She's like, what about this? What about this? What about this?
That the SCOTUS men not just hadn't considered, argued what weren't a thing. So Kagan was saying, well, what about when a woman's reproductive organs are at risk? Like
Failing.
Literally, like if you don't give her care, she's never going to be able to have another baby again. And Alito was like, yeah, that's not really a thing. That's not something that we have to concern ourselves with.
Yeah.
Is how the Alito handled that particular example. The SCOTUS men were off the chain to the point where Amy Coney Barrett, who, folks, hates abortion, like hates abortion, right?
Definitely helped end-ups.
Like definitely thinks that like it makes Jesus cry and that's really sad. Was just like, guys, what are you talking about? It's like, so that Amy Coney Barrett was ended up giving examples of where the health of the mother could be in jeopardy, where the life was not, right? So that was the setup for this case.
Just to go back to Amy Coney Barrett, it almost felt like she hadn't read the case because she had a different interpretation once the lawyer started talking. She was like, wait, what? I thought this was covered. No, that's not covered in the Idaho law.
Yeah, and just to do a little bit of a reframe, so the Solicitor General from Idaho went first, right? And so the women on the court, there was documented situations within this case that every single one of these women were like, if they break water, if there's toxicity, if it means that someone's fertility could be preserved if we provided abortion, would those things be covered? And he was like, yeah, I guess so. And then Amy Coney Barrett said, what if the state of Idaho disagrees with the doctor's decision to have an abortion? And the Idaho solicitor said, well, I guess he could get in trouble.
He said that's prosecutorial discretion.
Yeah.
And that chilled me.
And Amy Barrett was like, that's not what you said in your case.
Yeah.
But like at oral arguments, the man had to admit that you could end up prosecuting a doctor who made a decision to save the life or health of a woman. If the prosecutor in Idaho disagrees, that doctor could be prosecuted. And even Barrett was just like, how is that? That's not what you said.
Yeah. And
but the men were like, cool.
yeah, and here's the thing. So here's the thing about the men. So the men were like listening to this and like, eh. Then when the women just laid out truths, they laid out not hypotheticals, realistic scenarios. So then when the Solicitor General for the United States, her name is Elizabeth Preliger, and by the way, fun fact, are you ready for a fun fact? Because I fucking love a fun fact. So she's from Idaho. What? She was Miss Idaho. What? And was Miss Idaho in 2001 for the Miss USA pageant. Who owned the Miss USA pageant? What year was he walking into those dressing rooms? 2001. So she was a contestant during that time. So she's big mad.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. And she's also the balls. But anyway, so what was interesting was when it came to her laying out the case for why EMTALA trumps this, these men decided, I'm going to throw every realistic scenario that happens out the window. And now we're just going to ask you about a bunch of bullshit hypotheticals and see how you respond.
The hypotheticals were all about doctors, right? So the hypotheticals were all based on the idea that a doctor would have to perform an abortion in an emergency room situation against their religious or moral beliefs, right? Now, first of all, and this is not a legal point, but first of all, fuck them doctors.
Yeah.
You're a doctor, somebody's in the emergency room sick, you treat the patient. I want to hear about your God, if he lives on a mountain or under a hill. I don't give a fuck. You treat the patient, number one. But that's not a legal point. The legal point is that doctors already have every opportunity to not perform abortions that they do not want to perform, right? If a doctor is sitting there already under current federal and state law, if a doctor does not want to perform an abortion, a doctor can just leave the room and they will find some other frickin' doctor to perform their surgery, right? So all of these hypotheticals we're trying to get at a theoretical situation in which a doctor could not want to perform an abortion, but be forced to perform an abortion by the federal law because the woman was so sick that only an abortion was the procedure that could stabilize her. But from the doctor's perspective, something else could have happened. Like, I don't know, she could just die on the table as opposed to the doctor having to actually perform the surgery.
I want to slightly derail our conversation and also say that a month ago, there was the Miffy case at the Supreme Court with Elizabeth Preliger, the same Solicitor General, where they talked about this for a half hour. But to hear the justices speak, they had no idea how the Conscience Clause existed when it came to abortion in this country. It was wild. I was like, did we just do this? Apparently, I'm the only one who remembered.
But also, I just want to say, too, just to fine point this, the Conscience Clause it's a federal law, right? It trumps anything else. It trumps EMTALA, it trumps them. And every physician and every facility, both things are covered under this law. The only thing you have to do, if you are a facility or you are a physician who wants to encourage a Conscience Clause, you have to sign a piece of paper that says, I don't want to perform this. And then everybody works to make sure somebody else is on duty who can provide these things. And so that's where we're at. And it made me think, actually, why is there not physicians who are saying, there's a Conscience Clause. My conscience tells me that if somebody comes into my hospital in a state that has an abortion ban, it is my conscience that says I have to stabilize that patient by giving them abortion if I have to.
We need legal expert. What is
legal
that?
Expert. Can someone do that?
Yeah, they would just that's prosecutable. Yeah, the Hippocratic Oath. Yeah, that's not law. That's not law.
HIPAA protects facilities, not doctors.
It doesn't protect doctors from prosecution. And so when you have a law like the one in Idaho, the worry here, and this hasn't happened yet, but the worry here is that a doctor will perform a procedure and then get sued later, which chills the procedure. What we do know about these doctors in Idaho, though, already, and Idaho law only was passed, I want to say 8 months ago. I could be awful, a couple of months. It's a recent law. Already, 6 women have had to be airlifted out of Idaho to a different state to receive care that's illegal in Idaho. And I believe 4 of those examples, that different state was Utah.
Yep.
So when Utah is doing a medical procedure that Idaho won't, can you imagine how sick you have to be?
How magical are those underwear?
I want to just say, like, basically the law passed, but the Supreme Court allowed the law to go into effect this January. So what we're seeing are those airlifts all happened between this January and whenever the EMTALA hearings were a couple of weeks ago. And just to give some context, all of 2022, one person was airlifted out of Idaho to somewhere else for care. So like in just a quarter of a year, 6 times.
Airlifting. Who's paying for it?
Idaho is paying for it.
I mean, as usual with the Republicans, they're willing to cut off their nose despite their, if they can do something that's mean to women, they're going to do it. They're going to pay whatever it costs. But like the idea here that this is a edge case or these are rare occurrences is simply not true. This is kind of basic rote medical care that used to be available in Idaho that is no longer available in Idaho. And if the Supreme Court approves it, and we think, based on oral arguments, that it's likely to be 5-4 men v. women to approve the Idaho law, you can imagine that as soon as that decision comes down, that's going to be the law in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi. And it's going to be at least 20 other states that follow suit. The way that they're going to do it, just kind of legally speaking, is that Roberts and Kavanaugh, who are really in charge of the court, because we know Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch are crazy.
Trash is the word we use.
What Kavanaugh and Roberts are going to say is that the federal law and the state law do not conflict. So this distinction that I'm making between life and health, Kavanaugh is going to say there actually is no distinction between those two things.
He made that perfectly clear.
Right? So that way you don't have this federal preemption problem. You don't have to decide what's right, the federal law or the state law, if you can say that both laws are the same. Because then you can say that Idaho is already following federal law, and that allows Idaho to get away with it because they're following federal law according to Idaho, according to Kavanaugh and according to Roberts. That's how they're going to do it.
I just want to fine point that before these laws, we started seeing the results of them. Idaho lost 22% of their OBGYNs in the state. 22%, because people are terrified to practice there. OBGYN departments and hospitals are just fully shutting down. And so now we're not talking about abortion anymore. We're talking about people getting gynecological care and OBGYN care.
And people having perfectly fine laborers who just need medical attention, not having doctors to give that medical attention.
Yeah. So the other point that I want to hit that these men were very excited about, and before we get to sort of the recap and questions, is Alito was really obsessed with what if somebody comes into the ER with mental health crisis? Do they get to have an abortion if they're having a mental health crisis? And thank God Elizabeth Preliger said, you don't stabilize a mental health care crisis with an abortion. You stabilize it with mental health care treatments.
Yeah.
You dumb fuck. She didn't say that. That is me.
Preliger is basically like, we don't give those women abortions, we give them Prozac, you idiot.
Yeah. And she was like, and in fact, it would be unethical, right?
The men thought this was a slam dunk. The men thought there was a slam dunk. They're like,
they walked in
you're
like
giving
this.
abortions to crazy hysterical women in the middle of crisis, letting them kill their babies. And Preliger was just like, no, that's not what happens.
Also, how terrifying is it that someone who would ask that question gets to decide how much health care we deserve? Like,
Right?
Oh my gosh, you have no idea how any sort of medical care works, not mental health care, not abortion care, not OBGYN care, and you are deciding for all of us
Well, this is
what we are allowed.
well, this is the problem with men, and I say this as a man, as a penis American.
I like that you're penis. I'm gonna start using that.
We're not the most observant humans, right? Put it like this: my wife, after reading some of the stuff that I've been writing in abortion in the kind of post-Dobbs world, said to me, learning one of the best compliments she's ever given me. We've been married 20 years this summer. Oh my God, you were listening while I was pregnant. And I was, because my wife going through pregnancy taught me stuff about this issue that I did not know. I've always been pro-choice. I've always been against forced labor. I've always been like, check the right box on the liberal card, and right? But actually, like, watching her go through it, I was like, holy shit. Like, it's things that I just straight up did not know, was not taught. You know, when I'm reading What to Expect While Expecting, I'm like, did you know your wrists don't work anymore? Yeah. Right?
This is why women who've had children are pro-choice. Because they know what they got into and they're like, we know what this takes.
So-
No, people shouldn't do this willy-nilly.
But I bring that up from the perspective of having not had that knowledge before, right? And so, like, having that knowledge kind of come to me later in life. I don't think that a lot of men fully, just straight up, do not understand how it works and do not understand what's going on. And if you never learn, if you never listen to your wife while she's pregnant, right? If you never do the extra mile, if you never do the research, you end up with these dumbass questions like Sam Alito has.
Yeah.
Where he can honestly think, because he sits around watching Fox News all day and waiting for his wife to make him a sandwich, and that's his only interaction with her, that you could end up saying, like, well, what happens when they're crazy people? Like, and that's where Alito is, that's where Thomas is, that's where Roberts, that's where all of these Republican men are. They are ignorant on top of being evil.
I'm sorry, can we talk about how they're ignorant of the law as well, though? Because Alito also said, it's interesting that it says unborn child in this statute. What does that mean? And I'm like,
Well, okay, well, so this
that
is
seem like really like willfully obtuse.
well, it's not willfully up to, no. It's way.
Okay, strategically obtuse.
So the next fight, the next thing that happens is fetal personhood. And they have been doing everything they can to bring us to the point of fetal personhood. Fetal personhood is the idea that an unborn fetus should have the same rights of any born American citizen under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. That is literally
Yes.
where it comes from. The idea that fetuses are being denied equal protection of law. And that then goes to not just abortion, that goes through a whole host of reproductive related care. And it's also how they get at contraception. This idea, IVF, this idea that the fetus itself is a person deserving of rights and that the woman is just the incubator with mouth parts with less rights. Like, it's unclear how a woman can have personhood rights and the fetus have personhood rights, but Alito is pretty sure that the fetus is the person and the woman is just like the carrier.
So we had the women on the court laying out facts and being like, this is terrible. We have these men trafficking in hypotheticals. We've heard the case. I feel like Amy Coney Barrett has had some reproductive shit in her life that she is really understanding some of this stuff. It's my prediction. I'm not a prediction person, but it felt like all of the women were going to uphold EMTALA and that all of the men were going to vote against it. So we probably would lose on gender lines, but I'm curious what you think, both of you actually think about that, or if there was any man that was like, oh, I heard sense or not.
Here's the thing about Amy Coney Barrett. I agree with your read from what she says, but Amy Coney Barrett has a proven record of talking one way during oral arguments and voting a completely different way when it comes time to write the opinions. She basically talks like she's thinking, but votes like she's told.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very dangerous to kind of make predictions based on what she says at oral arguments, because she simply lies. Lie is a little bit too strong of a word because there's a willful, intentional evil with lie. Like, she will ask the right questions, but she votes like she was appointed to vote, right? I've made the joke that, like, whatever she says in public, she then goes home and talks to her husband and talks to Sam Alito and talks to Jesus Christ, and all of a sudden, she's back to the Handmaid's Tale, right? So, like, I agree that from what I heard, it should be 5-4 men versus women. but you never know about Barrett. However, you also never know about Roberts. And the thing about this case is that I do believe that Roberts understands that people hate his court right now and that Republicans are taking losses all across the country on this issue. If you go back to Dobbs originally, right? Roberts signed on with Dobbs. Roberts can be blamed for Dobbs. Dobbs is Roberts' fault just as much as the rest of them. But let's not forget, Roberts did not want Dobbs to go down the way that he did. He did not want to do the frontal attack on abortion. He did not want to overturn Roe v. Wade. He wanted to cut it by 1,000 cuts. He wanted to say that actually Mississippi's 15th-week abortion ban is totally in keeping with Roe v. Wade, which it wasn't, but he wanted to say it so that he could have had the same effect of killing abortion's rights without the political blowback of you killed abortion rights. Roberts thinks like that. And so he might think like that with this EMTALA case, because his framing, Idaho is already following the federal law, kind of cuts both ways. If you tell Idaho you can't have this law, you have to use the federal law, Idaho is still going to deny care to thousands of women based on saying, well, their health wasn't really at risk. Like, Idaho will still do some just jacked up evil shit, even if they have to follow the federal law. And Roberts knows that. But so he can still have the jacked up evil shit without saying, and we've overruled, you know what I'm saying? So he can have the impact that he's looking for without the blowback that he's worried about. And so he might also be a little bit in play, I think, on all of these anti-abortion issues. Roberts and Barrett become the fulcrum where, like, Barrett hates abortion, but kind of can't deal with the stupidity of the men. And Roberts also hates abortion, but is worried about political blowback. So you kind of don't know how those two are going to vote. The four horsemen, Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, two of them sexual predators, we always know where they are. And we always know where the three liberal women, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson are. But Roberts and Barrett always become the kind of questions in these cases.
So, Moji, just to put a point on this, will you talk a little bit about, if it goes the way Ellie says, you know, it doesn't matter what we think the makeup is, but we kind of feel like EMTALA will not trump this case. Talk a little bit about what that means if EMTALA is undermined in the larger scope of what care looks like.
Well, in Idaho right now, EMTALA is undermined, right?
Yeah.
In January, the Supreme Court justices allowed the EMTALA ignoring to happen in Idaho. And we're seeing airlifting out. We're seeing just doctors unclear of what to do. We're seeing people bleeding in parking lots and people's health being compromised. So I think we see that maximize in places like Texas and your Alabamas and basically Louisiana, all these places that we're already seeing terrible outcome for pregnant people, but it just gets worse and it gets nationalized. And I'm unclear of this, but I also wonder, does this just affect abortion? Like, you know, I feel like we're talking about the labor part of it, but EMTALA is fundamentally about stabilizing care for people who end up at a hospital and who need stabilizing care. In New York, do people just get to also decide to not stabilize people's care if EMTALA is undermined nationally? This is one of the concerns I have as well. I feel like a lot of times abortion is used as a Trojan horse for more terrible shit. And so that is one of my many concerns. Every time people go to the Supreme Court, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be one bad thing and then a billion terrible bad things that we haven't thought about yet. So I feel like the broader, what happens when people show up needing emergency care in a hospital, regardless of whether they're a woman, regardless of if they're pregnant, what happens if we don't have this standard federally for stabilizing patients?
It's such a good point because abortion is always, you know, we always talk about it as if it's a woman's issue. It's not just a woman's issue. It's obviously a family issue that affects, you know, men and women equally, but it's also an economic issue. It's also a poor person issue. I promise you, whoever Donald Trump is fucking now, he's able to pay for abortions post-Dobbs. I'm sure that's still happening. Herschel Walker can still pay for an abortion post-Dobbs, right? Like,
he has a special checkbook for it.
You know, I'm sure Matt Gaetz is Venmoing abortion funds all around the goddamn country, right? Like
the gates of hell.
Right?
What's your memo?
Rich people always are going to have access to reproductive health care in one form or another, in one state or another, in one country or another. So when we're talking about these issues, we are fundamentally talking about economically disadvantaged people, about Black people. People forget, before Dobbs came down, we were already at like nationwide all-time lows with abortions, right? We were already kind of doing what the Republicans say they want to do and what weak-ass Tim Kaine Democrats say that we already had. But who was getting the most abortions? It was poor women. It was poor Black women. Don't quote me in the podcast about the stat, but it was something around the 40 to 50% mark of women countrywide who were getting abortion were beneath the poverty line women of color. Were the stats of 2020 before Dobbs came down. That's why something like the Hyde Amendment is so particularly insidious and still needs to be dealt with. So when we're talking about this issue, we always have to remember that we're talking about a fundamentally economic issue that is designed to restrict the choices of poor women and poor pregnant people in a way that rich people just don't even have to worry about. And they know it, and they vote like it.
Thank you so much. This conversation's been really, really enlightening. All right. Let's go to questions. We good? All right.
I've been looking quite closely at Project 2025 and the mandate for leadership, and also about what Trump is saying he'll implement if he gets elected. And I'm wondering how much young women need to think now about those possibilities, because, for instance, people in blue states might think that they have HIPAA protections, which they're not going to have in January 2025. And I mean, even everyone who has a baby is asked, how many pregnancies have you had? How many live babies have you had? But also, Amy Coney Barrett in Dobbs was arguing that you can just have your baby adopted. Well, maybe not under Trump. Maybe the husband or the father has to give permission for you to have that baby adopted. And you know, we're 8 months away now from that possibility in January 2025. So should we be advising young women now to behave in ways that will protect themselves?
I would say behavior is an interesting word that I might not use, because I feel like what we need to do is protect our freedoms to behave as we like. And what I want to say about Project 2025 is, right now, the other Supreme Court case that we alluded to, which is the Mifepristone case, which is whether or not the rollback of medication abortion will go back to the protocols of the year 2000, which means ostensibly a 7-week abortion ban in all 50 states. It doesn't matter if you're in California or New York, and an in-person clinic visit when it comes to medication abortion. So we are already, when blue state people act like they're, I'll be fine in my state, that is a misnomer, because right now there's all these laws coming down the pike. Second of all, when it comes to adoption, I want to be clear that adoption is not the alternative to abortion. It's the alternative to parenting, right? And so we need to make sure that we don't frame adoption and that we don't accept that somebody is forced to have kids regardless for somebody else's parenting abilities. That is just not how we do it. You wouldn't force someone to give a kidney. You shouldn't force somebody to be pregnant and have a kid. But I think when it comes to Project 2025, I think we need to school people profoundly on what it is, because it's the Heritage Foundation's like rules for the road of what a conservative extremist government would look like. And it is terrifying when it comes to all of that prosecutorial thing. So I think that what we need to do is educate people on voting is the starting line. It is where you start. If you want the government to look like your values, it's on all of us to demand that of the people that we elect, and to show up and to protest and to put tents at your college campuses to say where you want your money to go.
And I also want to jump in, because I know that a lot of people are really not happy with our current Democratic government and what they're doing. And I also am not. But I heard someone say recently, and I really thought it was perfect. It said, who do you want to fight in January? Do we want to be fighting Trump, or do we want to be fighting Biden? Because we're going to be fighting, and we're going to have to fight. So like, choose the person that you want to fight. And you look at Project 2025 and you look at what the plans are for 2025 under a Republican government. We might not be able to fight that very effectively if we don't vote.
I would just add that my ear is not as close to the ground on the politics of it all as some other people, as some of my colleagues in the nation, or just people that I know from around the way. But my perception is that our problem is not young women. Our problem is young men. Young women are they know, they understand what's at stake. They understand what's on the ballot this election. It's young dudes that are lagging behind their counterparts on this issue, especially when it comes to issues like reproductive health. Part of it is that young men aren't educated, they don't understand a lot of these issues themselves, and they're kind of scared about it. They're scared about it, and they're scared of asking questions because they don't want to feel unknowledgeable, right? Because that means they'll have even less sex, right? But there's also this idea that abortion is something that women have to deal with, and it's not something that men have to care about, that we raise our boys to think, and that kind of long-term sexism of the issue, I think, bites us in the ass at these moments where you don't have a lot of young men motivated on reproductive health issues, on the abortion issues, which is fucking stupid.
We haven't given them the language and also stuff to do, right? It's like we did a campaign for Father's Day with W. Kamau Bell, where we had W. Kamau Bell and his wife actually put up how much money they've each spent on birth control. And Kamau was like, I think I spent a bunch of money on condoms, maybe $150. And she's like, $10,000 for IUDs, birth control, blah, blah, blah. So I always say to men, like, I feel like we did a disservice because we were backlashing, just like, shut the fuck up, get out of our lives, instead of learn how to listen to those of us who can get pregnant, learn how to support us, learn what leadership from women looks like, learn how you can stand with us, because the truth is we can't fight this alone. We cannot. And, you know, if you're not right now sitting with the person you ever had sex with, it's probably because of birth control or abortion. Like, you're like, oh, I got a free pass, I'm out of here. So, but I mean, seriously, no one got pregnant from a vibrator ever in the history of how people get pregnant. And so these things matter. The penis of the world. We do need to help them along and then hold them accountable once we give them the information to be part of the fight. So I agree with all of that. Next question.
Hi, thank you very much for your podcast. It's wonderful. I wanted to follow up on the question on the statistics, because if rich white women or rich women in general have access to abortions, they're not getting counted. So your 40% does not reflect the women who can afford abortions in any state, any city, any country. So we have no idea what the real stats are.
And I would also say we have no idea what the real stats are actually around abortion, because now that people are self-managing their abortions, they're getting pills from Mexico, they're getting pills from India. We don't know what these bans have actually done. There was a study just out by the Guttmacher Institute where the people using medication abortion jumped from 53% to 63%. So 63% of all abortions that happen in the United States are medication abortions. That only counts for the ones that we can calculate, not the ones that people have. So that statistic is probably higher or lower because of the people who couldn't actually access abortion. So we don't know a lot like statistically, because we live in shame and because we are trying to get things up that we...
Or because we live in banned states and it's not safe to tell people that you had a self-managed abortion.
That's right.
And so therefore no one's counting it.
Yeah. So yes, to your point, and even further. Yeah.
Hi. I'm curious in y'all's professional opinions what the chances are of restoring Roe v. Wade and maybe the steps in what we can all do to get there.
I'll
Please start, Liz, on this.
So I would love to have your takeaway today be to refuse the language of restoring Roe. Roe v. Wade was crumbs. Roe v. Wade did not help poor women, did not help Black and brown folks. All of this shit happened under Roe. These state bans under Roe, because Roe gave us Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which allowed the states to chip away at these laws. So Roe v. Wade isn't enough. And demanding of the people who are actually trying to think about solving things to really listen to why Roe v. Wade, we need to have unfettered access to abortion, and we need to make sure that abortion is not in any way, shape, or form in the criminal code of this country. It should be within health regulations. It should not be in the criminal code. So restoring Roe means going back to the beginning of this flawed decision, and we need to reinvent what actual abortion access looks like for everyone. So
I'll answer the question legally. So if I was running for office, I would say like, well, you got to do is vote for Democrats because we're going to restore Roe and bring everything back. And I'll tell you legally that that's going to be dead on arrival because the Supreme Court will overturn a national restoration of Roe, whatever, before they get downstairs for breakfast. The same Supreme Court that overturned Roe will overturn any national abortion law before fucking breakfast. And I'll prove why if you think about a little law called the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. Now, people remember Obamacare was saved, but it was saved how? It was saved because John Roberts reimagined Obamacare, which was a national healthcare law authorized under the government's Commerce Clause, under the Interstate Commerce Act of the Constitution, and he recharacterized the whole thing as a tax. And that's how he saved Obamacare. But fundamentally, the Obamacare decision repudiated the government's ability to pass a national healthcare law under the Commerce Act, which means that the Obamacare precedent is actually, as it comes to a national abortion protection, is against a national abortion law because the government can only pass a national healthcare law under its Commerce Clause authority. And the Republicans say that authority doesn't work for healthcare. So the government, the Supreme Court, will not let Democrats pass a national restoration of Roe Act, no matter how many times they tell you they'll pass it on a stump speech. They will pass it and it will get overturned 2 years later by the Supreme Court. So if you want to restore Roe, if you want to restore anything that Liz is talking about, if you want to have a country where national abortion laws are protected, the only way you can do that is by expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court. It is literally the only way. Because as long as these 6 conservatives hold power, they will never allow for any kind of national abortion law to take shape. But they will allow for a national abortion ban. The hypocrisy, I like to say, you know who doesn't care about being hypocrites? Hypocrites. Right? They care the least about their own hypocrisy. So if you want these things to happen, yes, vote for Democrats in overwhelming numbers. But like if you're not voting for Democrats that are going to eventually sponsor court expansion, you're not doing anything. Nothing stops, nothing changes without changing the numbers on the Supreme Court.
all right, one more question so we can get back to drinking and hanging out.
So I'm afraid to ask this question, but there's an ERA on our ballot in New York State, and it sounds like, from your viewpoint, that even if we have a national ERA, that with this Supreme Court, we're still basically fucked, right? They would overturn it. What's an ERA? Equal Rights Amendment that would include protections for abortion care and health care.
So the an Equal Rights Amendment would be interesting because the Supreme Court doesn't get to weigh in on the ERA, right? If Congress passes the ERA and enough states ratify the ERA,
27, I think? Is it?
Whatever, it's 2/3. It's a 30 something.
Okay.
10. I should know the numbers. I don't want to because then I just remember how impossible it is and it makes me sad. Yeah. So I like to fudge the numbers in my head. We need 30 something states, just Florida and a couple others. But fundamentally, if you were able to ratify an Equal Rights Amendment as the 28th Amendment, the Supreme Court wouldn't get to weigh in on that. And if such a ERA included an explicit grant of abortion protection, I don't know that the Supreme Court, even its most conservative version, I mean, Thomas and Alito would always find a way. But Gorsuch and people like that, I don't know if they would stop it because now it's not a statute, it's literally in the Constitution. Remember, the entire Dobbs decision is Alito saying James Madison didn't need no abortion. Like that's his actual fucking argument, right? So when you take that argument away from him, it really could work, but you need Congress, Senate, the president, and 34 or 35 states to ratify it, and that's where
and the explicit language. Because it just feels like everything is. This isn't said here.
Yeah, you can't soft sell that. You can't say like, oh, maybe, and so no, you have to be like, and bitches can get abortions for as long as they want, and I'm putting that in, and that's just got to be it. Because if you do any kind of soft sell language around it, the conservatives have an entire structure that allows them to get away with ignoring the plain text of the argument. And they'll call themselves textualists, but they can always get away from it.
All right, we are going
Can we
to
have one more question because there's like an actual man.
A man question. We need a man question.
Get to say,
Oh my goodness, a man.
Let's let the man speak.
Let the
Let the men decide.
Let the men decide.
As another penis American, I'm curious. Regarding the Idaho case, does it matter if there's two justices in play if they make sure only one of them decides that they're actually going to vote against and or for?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, people will like to tell you that the court is not 6-3 conservative, that it's 3-3-3, that there are three extremist, crazy people, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch. There are three liberals, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. And there are three in the middle, Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. And that the court kind of works on...
Who says that? Crazy people. What kind of assholes walking around with that 3-3-3? Herman Cain?
CNN. When I go on CNN, I get a lot of 3-3-3. When I go on MSNBC, I get 6-3. But when I go on CNN, it's a lot of, actually, the court's 3-3-3. So this is where that comes from, this idea that Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett are in play and thus more interesting and more moderate. That, to me, obviously is the wrong frame. The right frame, I think, is this. There are 6 crazy Republicans on the court. 3 of them don't give a fuck. 3 of them are like the Fire Festival. We're just gonna do it and be legends and like, whatever, right? The other 3, the Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett block, they want everything the crazy people want. They just don't want to look crazy while doing it. And so it's more about how they want to be perceived as opposed to how they want the law to be different. It's really interesting, and since we're over time, I'll just like riff for a second. It's really interesting to kind of look at how Thomas and Kavanaugh dealt with their credible accusations of being sexual predators, right? Thomas kind of dealt with it with like, fuck y'all. I'm here, you couldn't stop me, and I'm here for 30 years, and you're all gonna eat it, right? Like that's been Thomas's approach to his career. Kavanaugh, on the other hand, man, that man desperately wants to be liked. That man is so cloyingly desperate for approval that he does what we call, what a lot of our SCOTUS watchers call, he does a lot of cab concurrences, where he writes a 1-page concurrence to some horrible fucking decision where he's basically trying to argue to the media, to his friends at CNN, hey, I'm actually a reasonable one because even though I totally agree with this terrible law, I don't think it's terrible. Here's why. Here's how you can save me. Like, Kavanaugh spends more time reading his own press than Gwyneth Paltrow. So you can
But does he have a vaginal egg?
So you can have decisions from Barrett and Kavanaugh that are just as bad as a decision written by Thomas or Alito, but it's bad in a way that they're trying to shape it to get better coverage, essentially. That's why they're important.
Okay, now we really are going to...
We're going to stop.
Because now, this is the fun part, we're going to be able to talk, but sorry for those of you who are finishing listening to the podcast because we're signing off with you, but for those who are in the room with us, we get to hang out. We will be talking to you longer. We'll get some drinks. We'll finish up this afternoon with any of your questions you didn't get to ask, and you'll get to meet Moji, Ellie, and I. Thank you so much, Ellie, for joining us. Moji, as always.
That was such a great time. I wish you could have been with us. We had so many wonderful conversations with the folks in the room, and Ellie Mystal really brought home how important it is to have penis people as allies.
Indeed. And, just once again, thanks so much to Ellie and everyone at the Brownstone Cowboys HQ for hosting us for this special conversation, especially to Zoe and Heather Mary from Brownstone Cowboys for hosting us.
This gathering was the kickoff event for 2 amazing art auctions that are benefiting AAF. Brownstone Cowboys contributed their vintage shirt collection and invited activist and artist Diana Waymar from Tiny Pricks Project to stitch powerful bodily autonomy quotes from some of our favorite funny and fierce feminists such as Sarah Silverman, Margaret Cho, Natasha Lyonne, Sandra Bernhardt, and more. You can bid on all these amazing shirts at aafront.org/shirt auction.
And a lot of those shirts are signed by the people. This day of conversation, art, and activism also included a photography exhibit and auction. Some incredibly powerful photographs were donated to AAF by supporters like Michael Stipe, Helena Christensen, and Cass Bird, just to name a few. Beautifully curated by Brownstone Cowboys co-founder Heather Mary Jackson. To bid on these photographs, you can go to aafront.org/photo auction.
As always, links to the stories discussed in the pod will be in the show notes, and you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone, anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
Did we make you smarter today? Make you laugh? Show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, stay connected with us on social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access. And if you haven't already, go sign our petition at aafront.org and ask the FDA to use their power to protect mifepristone.
Looking for where you might fit in to do some abortion activism? We've got a 5-part activist training series, Operation Save Abortion, at operationsaveabortion.com. And while you're there, visit our super cool activist calendar, which is full of local and national actions and educational opportunities.
And next week, I'm in LA for a No One Asked You documentary screening, but AAF head writer Alyssa Al-Duki will be here co-hosting with Moji. Dr. Ghazala Moyetti, founder of Pegasus Health Justice Center, will be here to talk about centering equality, race, and cultural literacy in family planning. Plus, the very funny and talented comedian and writer Athir Yacoub, co-creator and co-host of the critically acclaimed sketch comedy show Muslim Girls, DTF, discuss their faith.
FBK is edited by Remy de Tournay and is produced by Abortion Access Front.
That's right. That's our show. So hope you loved it. Don't forget, go bid on those cool shirts, go bid on those cool pictures, and go have a great weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.